Hello, welcome to another edition of the VOD Weekly News Recap. I am Glorious Haddijatou Njie. Good evening. Now let's look at the headlines. Ferry boat stranded for 12 hours. Patient dies in ambulance. Mayor Bensouda organizes Q&A with students. NPP nominates 14 candidates in KMC. Anti-corruption bill suspended due to inconsistency in 2019 and 2020 versions. Kenya, opposition leader Raila Odinga calls for protests every Monday. Mali's junta leader presents new constitution project. Senegal president talks about controversial third term. Uganda passes a law making it a crime to identify as LGBTQ. Chad jails over 400 rebels for life after ruler's death. Putin, Xi Jinping discuss Chinese peace proposal for Ukraine as US denounces visit. Turkey seeks to enhance trade ties with Africa. Despite opposition, UK Sunak wins post-Brexit trade vote in Parliament. Those were the headlines. Now let's look at the news in detail. The Gambia ferry service has said the vessel Kunta Kinte, which was stranded at sea for 12 hours, had been entangled in a fishing net near Barra. On Sunday, 19th March, the ferry got stuck with passengers and vehicles at Barra for 12 hours, causing public outcry and outrage. A sick person in an ambulance on the ferry eventually died during the long ordeal. Alhaji Sarr, a native of Medina Serene Mas, was in an ambulance to Edward Francis Small Teaching Hospital. He was confirmed dead by the accompanying nurse after the ferry got stuck in the river for hours. Confronted by journalists, Lamin Jawara, general manager of the ferry services, said one of the vessels, Robert Propels, got entangled with a fishing net, a frequent occurrence near the land site in Barra. As a result of this, the ferry was not able to move and spent the night at the Barra landing site. When it happened, the captain rushed and removed the net and attempted to ply back to Banjul, but was hindered by low tides, Jawara added. Commenting on the death of the patient who was being evacuated to Banjul, Jawara described the incident as unfortunate and highly regrettable. The Lord Mayor of KMC on Friday, 17th March 2023, held the first edition of the Ask Your Mayor Forum with students from the Kanifing Municipality KM to allow them to ask any questions they may have for the mayor. Mayor Bensouda took numerous questions from the students of the University of the Gambia UTG, the Media Academy for Journalism and Communication MAJAC, the Gambia College, the Management Development Institute MDI, etc. In an event that lasted for over 2 hours, was highly interactive between the students and the mayor. During the question and answer session, Mayor Bensouda was asked to inform the audience about his council's plans and efforts to relocate the Bakote dome site.
Would you like it in West Coast region, in Jabang, in Birkama? Nobody wants it. So the right thing for government to do is to come up with a strategy to ensure that when we do close Bakote, we come up with what we call an engineered landfill. So the dump site, if it's to maintain or remain, should be changed from a dump site to what they call a transfer station. I know you're the health minister and you probably know some environmental studies. Transfer stations are locations where waste is taken to, sorted, recycled, and what cannot be reused is transferred near landfill, buried correctly. Buried correctly in the sense, when they dig a hole, they create a membrane The membrane in some countries they created with clay, in other countries they created with a film. The reason being, over time, as that waste decomposes, the leachage doesn't go down and poison the water table. So with backwater dump site, what we are facing is a risk of the water table for up to 5 kilometers radius being poisoned. This is water you're drinking from your wells. This is water you are showering in. And who knows, many deaths are happening in Gambia and the autopsy report is not concluded or conclusive. It may be as a result of chemicals being thrown into the water table by the backwater dump site.
In his response, Mayor Bensouda highlighted a number of developments his council has put in place at the dump site, including the fencing and construction of concrete roads at the site. He acknowledged that the dumping site is by far the biggest health crisis in the Gambia, as it is close to schools, surrounded by communities, and surrounded by SOS, which is a children's orphanage.
So we have engaged government, we have engaged the West Coast region. We created a task force. This task force, Banjul City Council was there, KMC was there, BAC, and Ministry of Environment, and of course, Ministry of Lands and Local Government. We identified 3 sites. This was in 2019. And the site they eventually chose as the appropriate site to transfer the backwater dump site or to create an engineered landfill was Faraba. But we all know the history in Faraba with Gambia government. So when the community was engaged, they rejected it. And for this reason, we as a local council don't have the power to transfer the backwater dump site. As you know, KMC is also the most urbanized municipality. It is the most built-up municipality. There is no remote lands.
However, the Mayor Bensouda told the gathering that the backwater dumping site problem unfortunately cannot be solved completely by his council, KMC. Mayor Bensouda said, for that reason, the local councils do not have the power to transfer the backwater dump site. The ruling National People's Party (NPP) on Monday nominated 14 candidates in Kanifing Municipal Council ward, leaving the rest to APRC ahead of the 15th April area councillors election. The IEC Deputy Chairman, Joseph Colley, who is overseeing Kanifing Administrative Area, said all candidates have fulfilled their legal requirements for eligibility, adding that the IEC would conduct its verification to ensure the 75 signatures that endorse their nomination are registered voters of their respective wards. Dembo Bojang, president of the National People's Party, after all their candidates were accepted, made a declaration that because of the people who escorted the candidates, he is sure that the party is going to win most of the seats in the entire country. The Minister of Sport and an aspirant mayoral candidate for KMC, Bakari Baji, also said that he is very impressed with what he saw and congratulated the candidates for being accepted. Anti-corruption bill suspended due to inconsistency in 2019 and 2020 versions. Aissatou Sow reports.
The Speaker of the National Assembly of the Gambia, Honorable Fabakary Njie, has suspended the consideration of the anti-corruption bill due to inconsistency between the 2019 and 2022 version. The most talked about anti-corruption bill was due for consideration before the National Assembly. However, the consideration of the bill could not proceed due to inconsistency of the versions of the bill provided by the Office of the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice. The Minister of Justice provided 3 versions of the bill, the Anti-Corruption Bill 2022 and 2 different versions of Anti-Corruption Bill 2019. All of these versions have slight differences in content, it disclosed. The Speaker of the National Assembly reaffirmed to the National Assembly members that there were 2 copies of the Anti-Corruption Bill before them, and in that that there is an anti-corruption bill 2019 and 2022 with slight differences in their context. The member of the National Assembly informed the Speaker that they will take up the anti-corruption bill 2022 instead of the anti-corruption bill 2019. Nominated member Honorable Kebalang Fofana told the Speaker that current FIPAC under the 6th legislature has never sat on the bill to discuss it, and it will be helpful if they sit on the bill and discuss it to help them understand it better. In response to Honorable Fofana, the Speaker of the National Assembly said it was unnecessary for the current FPAC under the 6th legislature to discuss it since the various one under the 5th legislature already did and submitted a report on it, prompting the National Assembly member to request for the Office of the Attorney General and Minister of Justice to make necessary adjustments to ensure that both of the anti-corruption bill are the same. The Act will provide for a number of strategies to be deployed in the fight against corruption. This includes investigations, prosecutions, preventing and assisting recovery, and also providing for the protection of a person who gives information to the Commission in respect of the offence committed or likely to be committed by any other person. Haddijatou reporting for VOD.
Now let's look at the news across our borders. Kenya's opposition leader Raila Odinga on Monday called for weekly anti-inflation protests, saying a war has started as Raila's clash with police in Nairobi. Every Monday there will be a strike, there will be a demonstration, the war has begun. It will not end until Kenyans have obtained their rights, said Odinga, in front of his supporters, who continue to claim that the presidential election on August 9th was stolen and that the government of William Ruto is illegitimate. Earlier, police fired tear gas and water cannons at Mr. Odinga's convoy. This was the first major unrest since William Ruto came to power. The protest movement against inflation, which rose to 9.2% in February, over a year in the East African country, was banned on Sunday by the authorities. In order to promote Mali's new draft constitution, Colonel Asima Gota, head of the country's junta, met with religious leaders, politicians, and civil society. It is now up to you to make this work your own. Above all, you are expected to disseminate it widely and explain it to the population, he says to the crowd, adding, Malians in all parts of our country and abroad need to be informed about the developments and progress of the draft constitution, he said. This constitution is the starting point of a vast reform project initiated by the transitional authorities in Mali for the return to civilian power. We must work together so that the Malian people, with full knowledge of the facts, that ownership of the draft constitution and adopted by a large majority. We will then have taken a decisive step in the process of rebuilding our state, added Gota. The referendum for its adoption was previously scheduled to be held on March 19, but since Friday, March 10, the authorities have announced its postponement to a later date, arguing there is a delay in the distribution of new biometric identity cards and that the National Electoral Body was not fully operational. Senegal president talks about controversial third term. Haddijatou reports.
Senegalese president has rejected claim that it would be unconstitutional for him to seek a conventional third mandate, again refusing to confirm whether he plans to do so. In an interview published on Monday, the opposition claimed that Senegal's constitution prohibits Macky Sall from running again in the next election scheduled for February 2024. In an increasing tense political climate, the opposition has repeatedly alleged that Macky Sall intended to override the constitution to do so. Senegal's constitution was revised in 2016 to shorten presidential term to 5 years from 7. It states that no one can exercise more than 2 consecutive terms. But in an interview with French magazine El Presse, posted online Monday, Sall argued that when the Constitutional Council was consulted before the revision, it considered his first term to be outside the scope of the reform. Legally speaking, the debate has been settled for a long time, he said in the interview. Now, should I run for the third term or not? It's a political debate, I admit it. Macky Sall continued, I have not yet given my answer. I have an agenda, a job to do. When the time comes, I will make my position known. First to my supporters, then to the Senegalese people. He also spoke about his main political opponent, Ousmane Sonko, who is currently facing 2 court cases that could threaten his eligibility for election. Sonko claims the charges are part of a plot to jeopardize his chances. Last week, a defamation trial against Sonko led to clashes between his supporters and security forces. Salah accused Sonko of manipulating the streets. An individual cannot block the street on the sole pretext that he is summoned to court, Sall said. If Senegal was not a genuine democracy, believe me, his fate would have been settled ago. Aissatou Sow reporting for VOD.
Uganda's parliament passed the law on Tuesday, making it a crime to identify as LGBTQ, handing authorities broad power to target gay Ugandans who already face legal discrimination and mob violence. More than 30 African countries, including Uganda, already banned same-sex relations. The new law appears to be the first to outlaw merely identifying as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, according to rights group Human Rights Watch. Supporters of the new law say it is needed to punish a broader arena of LGBTQ activities, which they say threatens traditional values in the conservative and religious East Africa nation. In addition to safe-sex intercourse, the law bans promoting and abetting homosexuality as well as conspiracy to engage in homosexuality. Violation under the law draws severe penalties, including death for so-called homosexuality and life in prison for gay sex. Aggravated homosexuality involves gay sex with people under the age of 18 or when the perpetrator is HIV positive, amongst other categories, according to the law. Our Creator God is happy about what is happening. I support the bill to protect the future of our children, lawmaker David Bahati said during debates on the bill. This is about the sovereignty of our nation. Nobody should blackmail us. Nobody should intimidate us. The legislation will be sent to President Yoweri to be signed into law. More than 400 rebels in Chad were handed life sentence on Tuesday following the death of former ruler Idriss Déby Itno, who was killed in 2021, a public prosecutor said. After a mass trial, they were sentenced for acts of terrorism, mercenarism, recruitment of child soldiers, and assaulting the head of state, said Mohamed Alban Nana, prosecutor of the capital, Najam Nami. He did not give a detailed figure of those jailed, saying only that more than 400 were sentenced to life, while 24 other defendants were acquitted. The trial opened last month behind closed doors at Clisson Prison, 20 kilometers 12 miles southeast of the capital. In early 2021, the country's main rebel group, the Front for Change and Concord in Chad, launched an offensive on the north of the country from bases in Libya. On April 20, the army announced that Marshal Déby, Chad's Iron Fist ruler for the previous 3 decades, had died from wounds sustained in the fighting. Déby died just after being declared winner of the presidential election that gave him his 6th term. His death was announced just a day after he had been declared victory over the presidential election that gave him the 6th term in office. He was immediately succeeded by one of his sons, General Mohamed Idriss Déby Itno, who took the helm at the head of a 15-member military junta. Now let's look at the international news. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese leader Xi Jinping discussed Beijing's proposal for a ceasefire in Ukraine during a first day of talks in Moscow, and they were meeting again on Tuesday. Xi Jinping visited a boost to Moscow as it struggles to make ground in its year-long war on Ukraine, but it was criticized by Washington as providing diplomatic cover for Putin and for the war crimes his forces are accused of committing there. While China has sought to cast itself as a potential peacemaker in the conflict, the visit underlined an even closer relationship between Moscow and Beijing as their challenge to the West. Turkey seeks to enhance trade ties with Africa, Haddijatou reports.
Nearly 1,500 businesses representing 41 African countries took part in the World Intersectoral Cooperation Forum in Istanbul. Opportunities for these representatives of the continent to exchange with their Turkish counterpart. Increasing trade between Turkey and Africa to $4.5 billion is the objective set by the Global Forum for Intersectoral Cooperations. The initiative also aimed to increase the notoriety of Turkey in the continent. Its approach is innovative. Now is the time to understand Africa and partner with Africa for its future. It is the time to build strategic partnership with Africa. Don't help Africa anymore. Africa does not need aid. Africa needs investment. Africa needs partnership, said Olta Benzuki, chairman of the Global Forum for Cross-Sectoral Cooperation and founder of Africa Trade Centers. The forum also wants to establish exchange connections, ensure that Turkey is not a foreign to African markets, which it does not know very well, and increase the visibility of Turkey in Africa. And Ankara does not intend to be in the list. Turkey's export to Africa will exceed $100 billion in the new century and want the Republic of Turkey to talk about export of $500 billion, underlined the president of the forum. Haddijatou reporting for VOD.
British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak won the backing of Parliament on Wednesday for a key element of a reworked post-Brexit deal on Northern Ireland, despite a lack of support from the province's biggest Unionism party and some of his lawmakers. Sunak has tried to end years of rambling over Brexit by revisiting one of the trickiest part of the negotiation and ensure smooth trade to North Ireland without creating a hard bother with Britain or with European Union members Ireland. He agreed with the EU to introduce the Stormont break, aimed at offering North Ireland more control over whether to accept any new EU laws as part of the win-all framework of measures. But in Wednesday's vote in the lower house of Parliament, those he wanted to win over North Ireland's Democratic Unionism Party, conservative Eurosceptics in the European Research Group, and his two predecessors, Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, said they would rebel. Despite the opposition, Sunak won the vote by 515 to 29, suggesting that several in his Conservative Party had abstained on the vote. Sunak and his ministers had urged lawmakers to support the break. That's all we have for you today. Until we come your way again, I am Glorious Haddijatou Njie on the VOD Weekly News Recap. Thanks for watching and have a good evening.